All right. Hello. Welcome back to the Humble Devs Road to Building Your SaaS. We're now at week 10 of the journey, so to speak, and we're getting into some exciting territory. We have been in exciting territory already for quite a while, but we're getting close to actually putting our, let's call it, version 1 of the application in place and getting things up and running, right? So let's get some things in order. So, okay, just give me all right. So I'm going to start by going over where we left off before and what I've done since then. So a couple of things have changed, and I want to run through these very, very quickly. Yeah, that's fine. This can go. Okay, so this is 2. 1 second, I'm just checking something very quickly. Yeah, all right. So let's, yes. Okay. See. Okay. All right. Good. So let me get back to. All right. So where did we leave off last week? Right. So we were building our app, right? So we finished the entire planning process. We completed the entire pre-planning with the project manager. We had the product owner as well do its thing and spread out the tasks. And we started implementing the features using the developer agent, right? Now that went quite well, to be honest. But as usual, especially if you're prototyping your application for the very first time, you will be most probably missing some functionality or some logical things that you need to have in place that you just didn't think about at the time. And thankfully, with the use of the BMAD method, it is quite easy to, whenever, at least when the agent notices that, okay, you're missing a feature, right? And to give you like a very, very specific example, let me start up my dev server again. And okay, just switching to the desktop view very quickly. So if we go to our browser, right? And we have, okay, so we signed up. Okay, no, that's not what I want to show you. So here, so when you sign up, so you have the landing page where you can sign in, right? So this is something that we've already had functional last week, and we created an account. But whenever a user would log in, there wouldn't be a way for the user, at least that wasn't planned, to actually find other users. So I created 2 different users so that I can interact with one another and test the features of the application. Where the agent or the dev agent was like, okay, I was like, okay, how can I discover my other user if I want to follow that individual? Because the follow feature was introduced using one of the stories, right? So the agent starts with the 1.1 and then 1.4, which is creating posts, and then it implemented 1.5, which should be used to be able to follow users, right? Now, following the users didn't exist. At least the agent created the functionality. But after he did that, he was like, okay, you can go ahead and test it. And I was like, okay, cool. How do I find that other user or any other user that I've created? So from that, the agent was like, okay, yes, of course. There is nothing in the app currently that lets you search for other users. So let me add this. So actually, when we created the posts, I was like, okay, we can't delete the post. So after I created it, if I want to get rid of one, it was like, yes, of course, this is also like a use case that's currently not in place. And the developer created this user story. And just like all of the other user stories, it gave it a relatively comprehensive documentation, what it needs to do, the acceptance criteria, and all these kind of things. It went ahead and implemented it within the same chat because it was already working on all of these things, so it had all of that context. So I didn't want to create a new chat and have it read all of the documents again just to understand what it's supposed to do. And it implemented that, so that works. If we go back, so if there is any post that I created, at least as this user, so this is humble dev 2, you can just delete your own post, right? And you get also this user prompt, which is, I mean, it's most probably not functional because I have to reload the page. This is still loaded from last week. Yeah, perfect. So any post that is in here, we can delete. Okay, it takes a bit of time because it has to check with the database in order to actually delete the post from the database as well. And this is taking quite a long time. Usually this is very, very like direct. Unless this functionality broke while changing something else. Okay, so our server is still up, it's refreshing. Seems to be okay. So if we go to the authentication page, it's still here. We go to the dashboard. Let's just refresh it again. Okay, so maybe we have a bit of a delay with interacting with our database in Supabase. And actually, because this is happening, as you can see now, normally, if you would create an application like that, it would be great to use some kind of caching mechanism so that your database, not your database, like your backend stores the database information so that it doesn't have to ask the database about the data. But again, that is again like adding more layers onto your application, which is currently not really what we want. So okay, so we have posts, we can delete them. I just want to try and delete another one. It's really, really taking a long time. Okay, so let's leave that. I'm wondering if it will just like disappear when it's done. Maybe Supabase is currently just very slow. Okay, so it added the functionality to delete the posts, which you have just seen. And then, when it eventually I was like, okay, I can't currently find other users. So it was like, okay, you would need some kind of user discovery panel where you can see other users. I'm like, okay, great. This is currently just like very basic, and we can set it in a way that we can basically see all of the users that we've created without like any problem directly. So okay, it created again this entire user story, and the user story was implemented and tested at least partially. Because there are still a couple of things remaining, but these are not really that important to get in. Okay, so yeah, it took a bit of time. I'm guessing Supabase has some issues currently because normally it should be very, very quick. We can create new posts. New week 10 post. We can post it. I also updated the interface just like that. So posting is relatively quick, but deleting seems to take a bit of time. And these are coming from the database, right? So whenever we are adding a post, it is adding this to our database in Supabase, and then also showing the same here. So it's refreshing the page as well to make sure that this appears. So this was also not functional in the beginning, it was broken. And when I told the agent that, okay, when there is a post, if I don't manually go and refresh the page, I don't see the new post. It was like, okay, we need to trigger for an update of the interface. I was like, yep, go ahead. And it did just that. So we now have the discovery page where we can basically search for users. And it will show us the users that is not like the current user, of course. which is great. So there is a search functionality added in here, which is great. It also shows that I'm following this other humble dev. And if we go to our other browser, so this is humble dev 1 without any numbers. Here we're not following humble dev 2, so humble dev 2 is following humble dev. And because of that, in here, so in the feed, we're actually not seeing any of the humble dev 2's posts because we're not following this individual. So we only see our own posts and the posts of people that we follow, at least in the current iteration of the application. And that works. So we here have only the posts by this user, right? Because they're currently not following anyone else. And I had a bit of a debate with our AI agent because initially when the agent added the feature to like posts, any user could also like their own posts, which I don't really think is a valid use case, at least not in my perception. So and the agent was like, yeah, there is not like a right or wrong way in doing it. It's all up to, how you want to implement it. I was like, okay, just block it, please. And it's blocked on multiple fronts. So it is blocked as an interface item. So the interface knows, of course, which user is logged in. And if the post belongs to that same user, then this UI element is blocked. However, if someone is clever enough and they can open the developer console, they could also change the logic, or they could enable this button in the interface and still like it. So they could still send a request to the server, to the database, to add a like that they made themselves. But also in the database, we have a rule stating that this user is not allowed to increment the likes, right? So it is secured, or at least blocked on both fronts, which is something that I did just more for demonstration, because you could leave this if you want. There is a reporting feature that was supposed to be added, but considering that we don't have an interface to deal with that, so if we report something, we also need to make it visible somewhere for someone else, like an admin, to actually look into the reported content. Not planning at the moment to also add a whole developer console or like admin page or something like that. So we're just going to leave that as a button that's not in use. But this is also a perfect example of showing you how do you continue building after you have released the version 1 of your app. So in here, my build is at the moment considered complete. So all of the user stories have been implemented. I don't have a user story that is completed. And at this point, I could go and speak to different agents, right? But if we look at it logically, let me go back to the workflow, right? So I'm just referring back to this just to make it very clear, like the thought process and how I'm getting to decide what is the next step for me, right? But this is also available inside of the project itself. So you don't have to come in here per se in order just to see this. Okay, things are a bit slow to load today. Well, that's all right. Because what we could do now is we have the list of all of the agents in here. We can basically go to our product manager. Let me just look up the product manager very quickly. Okay. I really wish the diagram would load a bit quicker. But if not, let's have a quick look, because we should have the oh yeah, here, so user guide. All right, so if we look at the it's a bit bigger though. Sure. So if we look at the diagram, right? A bit limited in space here. Hope this is clear. So the user diagram. So we started, of course, with our ideation. We set up the brief. We set up the PRD, and then we went into UX. And after, with the UX, we also had the architect put in the core build of our application. So at the moment, we have the PO, which is a product owner that ran the checklist to make sure that everything is aligned and whatnot. So we could basically go back to our PO and tell the PO that, okay, all of the user stories are now implemented and we want to add, functionality 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It will go through its checklist. It will check what is currently implemented. How could these things be added? And you could also do this with the architect. Because most probably you'll be passing this along to the architect as well. So if there are more things that need to be done, some more packages to be installed, more preparation work to be done, this can of course be done by the architect, and then you would again have the PO create new user stories based on all of the information that you've provided. And then again, you would go to the dev agent and then have the dev continue with implementing all of the new user stories, right? So this is a great thing about the BMAD method, that it creates all of this documentation that you can continue building upon, because you have all of these agents, and these agents document everything that they do very properly. So you can always just refer them to their own documentation. They'll go through it and they're like, okay, great. And they have the persona defined. They have their how do you call it, their work process defined in their own markdown file, right? Because when we go to different agent, just like we looked at before, every agent has a complete script that tells them what to do, things to look out for, things to compare, specific documents to read. And you can also expand upon that, right? So if you add new things, like for example, we added the use of context 7 before an agent writes code, so that it always uses the latest code blocks. And this one was also added into the dev workflow by the architect to ensure that the dev does actually do that. So this is something that we could do if we're like, okay, this is now version 1. However, I'm still missing this and this and that, or I want to add all of these functionalities. Then I can just name these. I can also do this with the analyst, but considering that the application is fully functional, I wouldn't do that. So I'd rather go to the architect or the PO and have a bit of a dialogue regarding, okay, do we need to add packages? Is there any specific technology that we need to use that we're currently not using? And preferably not, because we wouldn't want our tech stack to grow oversize and make our application very complicated to run. So preferably we would add the functionalities using the workflow that we have already established, or at least the tech stack that we have already established. All right. Now, going back to okay, so it's having some issues rendering the diagram, which is strange, but okay. It is what it is. Maybe GitHub is having some issues. Maybe it's my browser. Not sure. Okay. 1 second. Now, depending on where you are in the build, so we're currently at week 10, right? We started way back, but I guess, at least I hope, that the building process has been good and has been relatively quick for you as well, like it has been for me. Because we spend quite a lot of time going through the basics, understanding the different programming languages, understanding what we're supposed to do, before we eventually started building, right? So for me, all of the time that we spend just preparing, and then when we actually put it to use, the entire app, as you would have already seen, was written by our agents. So none of these files did I create myself. I mean, of course, some of them are created automatically when you initiate a Next.js project, because it puts in the general layout of the app, so all of the mandatory folders and whatnot. But everything else was created by our agents, was updated by our agents. So yeah, if you plan out your build properly, it can go very, very quickly, right? Now, again, this is a relatively simple application. So if you're building something that's bigger, it would cost you a bit more time to prepare it. It would also cost you a bit more time to implement it. But if you follow what we've done so far, you should have a relatively good experience. Having said that, I have, of course, been working with VS Code, plain VS Code, and GitHub, right? GitHub Copilot. We have a limited number of agents here at our disposal. In the last episode, I compared this to Windsurf, where Windsurf provides you with a vastly more agents to choose from. So there are a lot of agents that you can choose from. In comparison to VS Code, it only costs $5 more per month, which I think is more than worth it. And since last week, I've done a bit of an exercise because I wanted to build upon this project. So I want to create a version 2 of this project, so to speak. But that has many more features. So things that I have in mind, things that are currently not even mentioned here in the brief or in the PRD. Then I wanted to get a PRD build. So I tried to do this using the web, right? So I got the agent, I created a custom gem on the Gemini web interface, and it really solidified for me why there are so many new models that are being updated every couple of months. And sometimes the difference isn't that huge, but sometimes it is. So the Gemini 2.5 Pro that we've used, or at least I've used, to create my brief, right, which I found was a good experience, is quite bad, unfortunately. So I used Gemini 2.5 Pro on the web to create a new product brief and a new PRD. And based on the things that I told it, it created a relatively complex tech stack. And I was questioning it yeah, but can't I just start with Next.js, which we started here, and use this and use that, and at least get the product built, and then see if I will get sufficient users, and if there is sufficient use for it, I might at one day maybe transition to a different tech stack, or at least for the backend. It advised to use Java or a Java library, which is going to be a very different level of complexity. Instead of using JavaScript, you're now working with the Java language, having to run the JVM, which is the Java virtual machine, and having to integrate your front end, which is in JavaScript, and using JavaScript libraries with the backend that is in Java based. And it was no, because otherwise, if you have your user base already there, then you'll have to migrate to Java later on. It will be very difficult, and you need to keep in mind the scaling of your application and whatnot. I was still very hesitant because I was I don't think it's worth it, because it's going to make my application much more complex. I would also have to find other ways to host it, because hosting Java or the Java application in the backend is very different than hosting a JavaScript application in the backend, which is what the backend of Next.js is. And it made a lot of assumptions, which I found very questionable, right? Knowing at least having designed and developed a couple of applications, having some experience with the different backend languages as well. So I was a bit hesitant. I was okay, I'm gonna copy the brief that it created and the PRD, and I'm gonna just run it by a different LLM. I'm just going to give it to a different agent, and I'm just going to ask it to check whether there are any concerns. So I gave it some brief highlights. I'm like, okay, this is a product that I'm trying to build. I just want you to go through these two documents and tell me if there are areas for improvement, things that are not covered properly, and if the tech stack is the right tech stack for this kind of application, or if I should choose something that has better DX. DX stands for developer experience. And I gave that prompt to so it's not even here on GitHub Copilot. So I gave it to Claude Sonnet 4.5, which was released, I think, about 2 weeks ago now. Um, and Claude Sonnet, it was really funny because it was like, no, this is very bad. It's like you're making your application way too complex. I'm like, thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking. But it explained very, very clearly why. It was like, no, no, no. It's like, sure, yes, it's more performant. However, this is hypothetical and it's more performant if you have millions of users, of course. But it cited even examples of like certain social media applications that scaled to hundreds of thousands of users using relatively basic technology, just using JavaScript and using uh, Python in the backend. And that's it. Like no Java, no Java runtimes, and all these kind of things. And it highlighted so many different things that were completely absent from the brief and the PRD that Gemini 2.5 Pro created. And this just like really showed me, like again, how a different model that is more up to date and is better at like programming in general, let's say, can make a huge difference in just making sure that you don't miss any functionality. And because even for me, like looking at my project after having this this kind of eye-opening experience with Claude 4.5, when I thought about like this scenario, so even in my application here, because I created the brief using Gemini 2.5 Pro, I think if I would have created the brief and the PRD with something that was newer or better for development in general, that I would have most probably had the user stories already in place. So the ones that weren't there, where am I? Yeah, so docs, yeah. So the missing user stories. So for here, for example, deleting your post, discovering users, it would have already thought about, okay, if we're going to follow users, there must also be a way to actually find these users, right? So this is just to say, I just want to inform you of the fact that you would really want to use the latest AI model that you have at your disposal whenever you're starting to um, put in the groundwork for your application, as well as do a bit of validation. So take your user story, take your PRD, give them to an online. So just go to Claude on the website, or ChatGPT for that matter, and like in just one session, right? You don't need a paid subscription, you don't need anything. Just go in there, you're like, okay, this is an application that I want to make. I have a brief and I have a PRD. Can you please run through these and let me know if you find that there is anything missing, any obvious functionality that is currently not in place? The tech stack, does it look correct? Am I missing something? Should I be adding or removing something from it, right? And especially if you're doing this as a solo developer, ask it about a good developer experience, right? So just say that, okay, I want to have a good DX, and then let it advise you. And then if you get feedback, right? So it's like, okay, even if it was really good, right? Or even if you did it in the IDE with Claude 4.5, for example, and everything was great. But it's like, yeah, but you might reconsider this, or you might want to add this, or you're missing a feature here that should be like considered as an obvious addition that you're currently missing. You can just pass all of this feedback in, into the IDE. So just tell the agent, the analyst or the architect or whoever that, okay, can you also please look into these aspects, right? And let them then add it to the documentation properly. Okay. Yeah, okay, so I don't know what's happening here, but it's loading now, so cool. So having said all of that, how do we continue from this point on? So let's say you managed to build your app, right? So you followed the entire user flow. You had the agent build your application. And if you get stuck, right? So it's very important to understand that when you get stuck, and this is something that I also showed last week, I'm happy to continue with that as well if you guys prefer. Um, the I want to highlight a couple of things, right? Because when you're when you're creating your application, right? You would have seen that the agents or the architect as well as the dev, they will run build, right? Every time that they add something. This is very, very important because it compiles your entire application. Um, it basically creates a version of your application that is meant to run on a server, right? So when we are going to deploy our application, that is also what our production environment is going to do. So in order for you to avoid running into deployment issues, you always need to make sure that you run build at the end of your building process, because you will catch if you define, for example, a variable that you never gave like a value. If you're naming a variable somewhere that has not been defined, if you are having any kind of linting errors, right? Or like you're missing a an argument somewhere, you're missing something, you're not closing your brackets properly, all these kind of things, right? So closing of the brackets should be very obvious because it will show you that in your interface very, very quickly. So if I would, for example, just delete this, you will see some red here immediately in the interface. It's like, okay, you're currently your code seems broken, because it is. So all of this is just to make sure that how do I put it? So the syntax isn't the problem, but the problem is with your code. So when you run build, it will look at all of the routes. So are you routing your user properly? Are all of the routes that you're going to send your users to functional? Is there any function that is supposed to run that doesn't run properly? So the function is broken because it's not getting the correct input, isn't able to parse the correct output. All of this is being tested when you run build. So if I do npm run build, okay, it will go through the process. It will create an optimized build for production, and if there is anything that is broken, it will tell you that. So currently there is something broken, right, which is on purpose. I'm currently using the dev. I have ChatGPT 5 selected, and I'm going to just copy this. I can also just say that I want to add this as a context. I can just highlight all of this as an npm run build, and this is it's kind of broken. So I'm gonna nope. Sorry, I didn't select this properly. I don't need to tell it anything because it will see that, okay, I'm running build, I'm getting an error. It will already understand the context. It's okay. So it's failing to identify. So there is something in the syntax of the user discovery page. So it's going to now look at that. this like failure that's here is not really critical. All that is broken at the moment is a test that doesn't run because the test configuration isn't proper. But it is very important to make sure that your build is executing without errors before you start deploying. Right? This is a very, very important thing because if not, when you are deploying, the deployment pipeline will break. So you will get an error on your cloud environment where you're trying to deploy it, and it's going to give you the same error that you would otherwise get here in the terminal. And then you have to, fix it, create a new deployment, and all of that. So it's better to make sure that your application is functional, that you're able to run build without any errors. Once you're able to do so, your application is fully functional. Go through your app, test it properly, go through the user interface, make any adjustments that you think are required. And then after that, you can basically run build and make sure that everything is good to go. And from that point on, you can just continue. So it's now going to run test, which is fine. I don't need it to run the tests because all of these tests I've actually disabled. Actually, it's running again in the wrong directory. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but in VS Code, I don't experience this on Cursor or Windsurf. It always creates a new terminal window, and then it's like, okay, I'm in the wrong directory again. So it has to navigate itself back to the correct directory just to run the scripts, which is a bit of a pain. Okay, so it ran the test. The test was successful. It's now running build. Build is having more errors, which is not really a big problem. So it's reading this now. So it looks into the terminal. It's like, okay, more things are broken. Let me work on these. And actually, I shouldn't even. I shouldn't have bothered with adding the tests, but I thought it was something good to show you, because it is quite important to create tests for your application, especially if it's an application that you want to utilize, right? So you want to publish and you want to actually use, because the tests will allow you to catch anything that's missing in your application. So anything that should be successful, because our dev agent also has metrics, right? So it has things that it has to pass before it can consider any task complete. And in order for you to make sure that these things remain functional after you have added more functionality to your application, that's why you add tests. Because if you're going to, so if the developer agent is working on a new user story, right? So now we went through the exercise to talk to the PO and maybe to the architect, and we've added a whole bunch of new user stories. When the developer agent is going to add that user story functionality, it will test that story, right? So it will not go back and test all of the other stories that it did before. And if we have tests in place for all of the things that have passed in the past and that are still functional in our application, then whenever we run tests after implementing new user stories, and some of these tests fail because the agent broke something while working on the new user story, then the agent will go back and like look at the test criteria and is like, okay, the test is testing like this specific thing. Let me go back and see why it's not working anymore. So it will fix its own mistake, basically. And that is the reason why adding tests to your application is very important, but it can also be a bit time consuming. So it's best that if you want to create and run tests, to also have your PO and architect define these properly, because they need to define which library is going to be used, how the tests are going to be created, the passing criteria. So how many of the tests, or what's the percentage of the tests that we want to pass before we say that, okay, you're allowed to continue. Because depending on the kind of tests that we're running, we might not really care if all of them pass. But again, there needs to be sort of a prioritization there, and it's best to have the PO and the architect decide that during that process, so that you will have a robust build that has proper tests in place, and that your application isn't going to break easily without you knowing later down the line when you keep on building it. Okay, so it now is giving us a rundown of what it did. The last run build was properly, so it ran build. There were no issues with compiling our app or linting errors or anything like that. So all of this is fine. It shows us the app route and all of the different pages, which is great. Okay, so now that we have an application that can run built properly without any errors. Let's say this is the version 1 of my application, right? So for me, this is all I want. Actually, let me get my npm run dev. Just let me get my development environment up running again. So I have an application that's functional. So all of this is local, right? But all of these, all of this is coming from the database, right? So if I go to the database, which I can show you. So this is an actual functional app, but currently we're only using it locally. So if I go to my table editor and I go, for example, to my posts, actually where are we? Yeah, we're already on posts. You see that all of the posts that are in the app are indeed here. And if I would add one, they will be added. There are some client IDs missing for some reason. Interesting. Yeah, okay, so this is again an example of something that might have broke or wasn't functional properly before, because at some point this was fixed. So okay, I guess these were there before I added any functionality that required the user ID to be reported in here. So okay, good to know. So yeah, we are still missing some functionality, right? So we have posts, but we currently don't even have a repost functionality. So there is no way on my application here. So if there is any post by a different user, so I'm now on humble dev 2, I see this by humble dev, but there is no button currently to actually repost this one as my own, right? So again, there is some functionality that is missing. There's a lot of functionality that could be added, but that's not the point. So at the moment, we're saying, okay, this is version 1. Actually, it's not version 1, because I just remembered that there is something that's very important that's missing, that I can't log out as user. So there's no way for me in the interface to get out of this. By the way, this here and this here won't be in the actual app, because these are development tools. So because I'm running dev, this functionality is only in the development environment. So this will not be a part of our deployed application, just to let you know. So yeah, let's fix that. So my dev, currently when a user is logged in, there is no UI element or menu that allows the user to sign out, which is quite an important thing to have. So that's something that I definitely do want to add before continuing to deploy this application. So yeah, let's do that very quickly. So it's looking at the authentication path, it's looking at the layout, looking at the main page when the user is basically logged in. So it's checking at the login page, the sign up page. We'll add a small client, a sign out button component, and integrate into the dashboard header. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, the dashboard is basically this. This is the user dashboard, as you can see here in the path. So this is just so again, the / is the root. So this is the main page of our application. And then the dashboard is the path that we're currently on. And the dashboard just means the user's profile, basically. As you can see, it has added the sign out button here, which is great. And is going to run build, which is also great. I don't know why it wants to run it twice. It's already running. Okay. So I'm going to skip this. I'm just going to say build was run properly without errors. Yeah, okay. So it was added. So let's give it a quick try. So if we sign out, actually, I have to run dev. Apologies. Run dev. Go back to So I'm just gonna go back to dashboard. Okay, so dashboard shouldn't open because I logged out. So the only thing that it should allow me to do is basically just to sign in. So if I try to basically go to dashboard manually, it doesn't. So it immediately brings me back to the sign in page, which is exactly what we want. And if we go to the other browser window where we have another user logged in, do we have another user logged in? Yeah, we do, but not here. So this is Humble Dev. So Humble Dev is still logged in, but if we refresh, we have a sign out button, which is great. That's all we need for now, and that is perfectly fine. So how do we deploy this now? We went over a couple of things. So we have basically our database up and running, right? But everything that we have in our projects, actually, before we talk about deployment, let me quit the server. We're going to commit again. So we're going to actually, I want to make sure. So pwd means print working directory. I just need to make sure that I'm inside of the project folder. So we are inside Humble Devs, Humble Words, which is the main folder in my browser. So not the browser, but the file manager. So here I have this folder, that is this one. But inside of that folder, I have another folder, which is the actual project itself, which is like the application, which is coincidentally also called, let me close all of these because it's a bit, which is also called Humble Words, which was named by the agent, which is maybe not great, but that's okay. So I'm in the correct folder because I'm in Humble Words and then inside the other Humble Words, which is this one where the application is. So I'm going to say git add. So dot, again, we're adding everything, git commit. Message is added sign out button. And now ready for V1 deployment. Okay. Yep. And we're going to say by saying our name. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Git push origin main. Okay, so now if we go to our GitHub repository, we can see that we have just now updated, and this is also the submission message, right? So added sign out button and ready for V1 deployment. That was the message that I sent. So that's great. We have our repository. Our documentation is, I would guess, relatively up to date. I could always ask our agent to update the README file with the current structure of the project, which we could do in a bit. But yeah, cool. So everything is now ready. Now we chose, or at least initially, we said that we're going to deploy this on Vercel. So that's what we're going to do. And then after that, we're going to cover a couple of alternatives. So for now, all I did is I went to vercel.com and I just created an account, nothing more. So I just signed up. You just log in with like your Gmail or GitHub account or GitLabs or with Bitbucket. or anything else with an email address and a password. You do need to provide a phone number for them to be able to contact you if there's any kind of problem with your application or deployment or whatever. Maybe before doing that, let's look at something else. Let me just go to a different browser. So if we go to Vercel pricing. Okay. So why are we hosting on Vercel? This is a very popular location to host your web applications or SaaS, because it provides you with very decent free tier utilization. So you can host your app completely for free without paying anything, without putting in your credit card or anything like that. It provides you with basically all of the features except for like utilization limits, right? So you do get quite a lot of requests. So you can have up to 1 million requests to your like different pages and like UI elements and functionalities and whatnot per month, completely for free. You are limited to 100 gigabyte of data transfer per month. So if you are, for example, hosting an application that also has a lot of like, I don't know, like images or like videos or like any content that has a lot of data, you might be consuming this quite quickly. But for any like normal web app or SaaS, because most of it is just going to be text and like some images and whatnot, this should be more than sufficient for a relatively significant user base. And this is basically the reason why. And the other reason is for the great developer experience as well. So you can go through these, but you do have to be aware of the fact that if you exceed the minimum limits, you will be charged at some point, right? So if you're just setting up an app that you're going to use like for like a hobby or like for personal use or like with a relatively limited user base, you shouldn't really worry about it all that much. But if you're deploying an app where you might get a decent user base, or your application might become very popular because of the way that you're marketing it or whatever, do keep in mind that you have to look at your utilization closely and monitor it, just to make sure that if at some point you do reach the limit, that you are ready to start paying to host your app or to continue hosting your app. Now, going after that, the general payment is also not that much. However, this can be deceiving, right? So it might look very cheap, but it's not, because it says, okay, you'll pay $20 a month plus additional usage. That means that everything that is in the pro tier that is included will cost you $20 a month, which is again still a great deal, to be honest, right? So even if you're hosting an application that has significant use, you would still get by. However, so it tells you, okay, this is what you're getting in terms of requests per month. After that, you'll be paying $2 per 1 million request, which is again great. But if you're, let's say, getting 1 million users a day visiting your application, right? This will explode in terms of like money that you're paying per month, right? So just keep that in mind. So it might look cheap on the surface, but you have to realistically think about the number of requests that your application is going to get at some point. Also like the data transfer, and you can go through all of these yourself. Again, if you're hosting a relatively niche application, or this is going to be your first SaaS and you don't expect for like hundreds of thousands of people to all of a sudden be using your application, there is not really all that much to worry about immediately. So having said that, let's go back to where were we? Here. So I'm logged in. I don't have anything here, so this is a completely new account. What are we going to do? So we deployed already to GitHub. But there's not much happening here. Now, this is where the magic comes in. So this is also one of the great things about web development in the current time, because all of this used to be very manual, quite painful, quite time consuming. You had to manage a lot of things manually. Now, with just a few clicks, you can publish your application. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to continue with GitHub. So it's going to ask me to sign into my GitHub account. So I'm already logged into GitHub. So it's going to immediately say that, okay, do you want to allow Vercel to, authenticate your GitHub account? And I'm going to be like, yeah, sure thing. Good. So it's like, okay, install GitHub application for the account you wish to, yeah, cool. So it's like, okay, this is important. So installing Vercel on GitHub just means that GitHub has a plugin for Vercel as a part of GitHub itself, where you're now going to tell it, or at least give permissions, right? So the Vercel plugin on GitHub, to which repositories should it have access, right? And it tells you what it can do. So it can read and access metadata. It can read and write access to administration checks, code, commits, issues. And if you're building something privately that you're never going to deploy to Vercel, it is handy to say that, okay, I will only select certain repositories. You can edit this over time. So if you add more things that you want to publish, you can do that. So let's do that. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to give it this one. So this is the current, this is the repository where I have the project, right? So if I go here, this is the name. So it's Humble World Social. Where was I? Okay, the pop-up went away. Okay, so I can select this one, or I can say it can just look into all of the repositories, and that's perfectly fine with me. So let's be a bit cautious and say that we only want to. Was that one already? Oh, it's already selected here. So that's fine. We're going to say install. When you're ready to trigger email to verify identity. Okay, hold on. So let me just bring you VS Code very quickly. Let me verify my email address. All right, so it's just sending me a code to my email and entering the code as a verification. Yeah, so it's doing that purely because we're like now installing a plugin, and it needs to verify that we are the user that should be able to do that. Okay, so that is now done. And the okay, so this is the repository, right? So this is the account, this is the repository, and now we can import this project. So what does that mean? It means that Vercel, the platform, is now going to get our app from our repository and try to build it. So let's do that. Now, the account is free, right? So this is where the hobby plan comes in when we looked at the pricing page. It says, okay, the project name, I'm just going to keep the project name the same. You can edit it here if you want. The framework that we're using is Next.js, right? So you can also host other frameworks. So all of these are frameworks that are also supported, which is quite a lot. So you don't have to stick to Next.js exactly, but Next.js is the ideal framework to use for hosting on Vercel. It's asking out the root. So the root directory. All right. So the root directory is by default just /. You can edit it, but this is the norm in general. So normally we wouldn't do that. We have the output. So there are specific commands that we can tweak. If that's something that we want, I'm just going to use it. I'm just going to leave it as it is because we're using Next.js as a relatively default deployment. Now, here's an important thing. So it says environment variables. Now, if you remember when we were building our application, we set up our database, right? And the database provided us with a couple of environment variables. So if we go to our documentation, it also says that, okay, we have environment variables, which will start with our Superbase database URL, as well as the API key. There are other things. So there is like a service role account admin key that we can add here. We're not using that. So that's why we didn't even cover this one. We can use Upstash. Again, you can use Upstash for rate limiting. So if you want for a single user to not load your sign-in page more than like one time per second or per 10 seconds or whatever, then you can use Upstash to do rate limiting on these different routes where you expect the user to log in or to pay for something. We might do this in the next episode if you guys are interested in seeing that. We could also use resend, which is something that we will add in the next session to handle email sending and receiving from your application. So these environment variables, right, are used in our application. So if we open up the code base and we go, for example, to where am I? So we are in the application and we want to basically go to profile page. So this is the dashboard. This is where the environment variables would come in. At least I would expect that they do. If we look at the env, so this is not the page. Onboarding. Okay. No worries. We can copy the key and not in here, please. So we can search our project. We're like, okay, where is this mentioned, please? So it's in the README, which is very fitting. So we have in the client, we have this key being used, right? So if we go there, this is the client component. So this is the front end part of our application where we're saying that, okay, we need to create a browser session for a client, and we need for that these environment variables. So there's process.env dot the name of the environment variable, right? And this environment variable here doesn't have a value, but the process.env means that we need to get from our .env file the value for this key, right? So again, if we go back to our documentation, in our environment .env.local currently, so this is just for the local build, but the actual application will have just a .env file. And whenever this is being named in our code base, so any page that has process.env. whatever key is here, in the backend, we need to have the actual value present. So when this application is running and it runs the code for that page, it sees this, it goes into the backend, at least in the secure area where this code is stored, and it will get the actual value so that it can send a request. Why is that so? Because the user should never be able to see this. So even if they open the developer console, even if they try to find out what this URL is, we should never expose this to the client. And in here, so when we come into our project, we're saying, okay, what are your environment variables? We can fill these in now so that our application will be functional when we try to run it. I'm going to bring you back to the browser, and I'm going to add the environment variables. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna put you somewhere else because I need to get these out of the VS Code. 1 second. Because I had these, of course, in our environment.local so that we can get it functional inside of our development environment. So I'm just gonna copy these. And it's always a good idea to store these in your password manager or somewhere secure so that you can always have these ready. So you do want to copy the name of the environment variable, exactly how it is in your file, and you want also to have the value, of course. So I'm just adding the Superbase URL as well as the API key. And you can always edit these later on. So just having this once, I mean, this is not the only chance that you'll have to do it. But considering that now that I've filled it in, it will already start deploying. So it will run build just like we did locally. It will start to, because it will create an environment for your application to run. So it will also go through the config file. It will install all of the dependencies that npm has named. It will install all of the versions that we need for application to run. It will do like linting checks. It will do all of that. Okay. Yeah, I wish the current window where I'm at would allow me to collapse or hide the keys, but it doesn't. So currently it's like running the build process. But we will run it again. So this is not the only first time that we'll able to see it. So if it's done now, so let me bring you back. Welcome. Our application is now live. So I put in the API keys and we are here. So just deployed your project, which is great. And we're going to continue. So we can add a domain. So if we purchase the domain, we can add one. And then we can add some insights as well, which we'll do in just a bit. Actually, yeah, let me open this one separately. Okay, so we're not going to yeah, we are just we'll do that in a second. So we're going to continue to dashboard here. And this is what is great about a platform that allows you to host your application, because it takes away the complexity of actually deploying your application online, right? Because you could do this on like your own server or on a virtual private server that you're renting. However, you're going to have to install everything yourself. You're going to have to prepare the environment for your application to run manually and then deploying it in a way that the application becomes available to the general public. So yeah, and this is now an application that has an actual address, so we can visit it. And it has the name of the application .vercel.app, because again, we're hosting it on their platform. But we can buy a domain and add a domain to our application where we will just visit our own domain. So if we really want to call it humblewords.com or anything, we can make that happen. You can do that through Vercel, or you can like buy your domain somewhere else and provide the domain to Vercel to use. So okay, it is saying that, okay, we have a couple of recommendations for you. Build multiple deployments simultaneously. Yeah, okay, that's fine. We don't need that at the moment. So also, a platform like this provides you already with a lot of security. So it will already protect your website, make sure that it doesn't get attacked or hacked or whatever. So all of this security that is already like built in, you don't have to worry about at all. Where if you would host this yourself, you do have to make sure that your server that you're deploying is somewhat secure, that you don't have protocols or like ports or anything like that just open for anyone to communicate to if they know like the address of your server. So you would need to do a bit of like security hardening for your server before you deploy something. And a platform like Vercel takes all of this complexity away from you. Okay, so if we go to deployments, we only had one, right? So this is the current one. And whenever we update our project here in GitHub, it will automatically redeploy to Vercel because we set up the integration. So we set up the app, we told it to deploy this repository. So it will now continuously do that. So if we would add features to our application that we currently just don't have, we will just push our app again to GitHub, and this will automatically deploy a new build. And to show you, for example, the settings, you go to settings, you go to your environment variables. So here they will be hidden by default, where you can see that, okay, I have two here. I can change these. I can also show them if I click on the icon. So if I would add a resend or I add Redis or any other thing that I'm adding to my application that requires an API, not an API key, but an environment variable, I can just add these. So I can just go in here, add the name of the variable, add the value, and then just save it and redeploy my application. So one other thing that is great about these types of platforms is that you can enable analytics, right? Which is quite simple. So let's go and do that. And while doing that, we will also be showing you how the updates will work. So this is the thing that I was talking about here. So it's like, okay, great. Maybe you want to see your like user experience and how that works. So it will allow you to gather some insights. So if we say we want to enable this, it's like, okay, you're currently on the free plan, right? And this has some limitations. So you can only capture up to 50,000 events per month that are included. You can only see 30 days of visit history. You cannot see it for more. So we're like, okay, that's fine. Let's enable that. Now, in order to get this to work, right, we need a couple of things. So we need to install this library, right, which we can just simply run. So npm I for install, and then Vercel analytics, which is fine. So let's do that. You guys are seeing this, right? Yeah. Okay. So inside our project folder, so print working directory, we are in the project folder. We're going just to paste this in. And this is a very small package, so it shouldn't really take a long time. So while this is going on, let me go back to the browser. Nope, what happened? Okay, so our testing suite is stopping that from happening. Okay. Yeah, okay. That's fine. So I'll let the agent deal with that, and I'm going to continue to explain what's happening here. So it's like, okay, when you have added analytics into your like your project, right? Because we need this to be a part of our build. Then we just need to make sure that we have this component as a part of our layout file. Okay, so attempting to install without optional peer. Yeah, sure. So it will run it will run the required install. Are you sure? Okay. Why is this so complex? So recommended using Next.js built-in Vercel Web Analytics, no extra package. Since you're okay, so it's already installed. You can use the React endpoint by adding the dependency explicitly, or a newer version use simple. Okay, so go to your project, analytics, enable. Nothing else required in code. If you want to client component, install. Okay. Okay, fine. So let's do nothing then. What did it actually add, if I may ask? Okay, so this was for the sign out button. Okay. So this has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Fine. Okay, then we're just gonna leave that be. So this is something that we already have built in. Great. So yeah, it gives you different install commands. Fine. So we're just going to copy this and go to our layout file, which is here. So it's in the main app folder, and it says that we need to add this. So we're adding analytics from is declared, but value has never read. Can't find the module. Okay, so let's get our agent to fix this. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to use the Vercel analytics and have added the following to the layout file as instructed on the verse page. Actually, I should link the layout, so I'm gonna do yep. Okay, running build, which should be okay. Okay, installed and build passed successfully with your import analytics from Tata is present. Finish writing. Hope you still need to actually render the analytics. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So okay. So we added this here, right? So this is the layout page. It says that we still need to add the analytics component to the layout page itself, right? So we're currently not doing that. So I'm just gonna use client, run analytics inside the sure. Okay, so it's great. That's also explaining how you should go about this. So option A, inline in layout. Since layout is a server component, render analytics directly at the end of the body. Yes, body section. Okay, sure. Go with option A. And this is one of the great examples of something that you should do yourself, because it's nothing more than just adding this inside of our inside of the body of our layout page, right? Because this is not something that's going to actually be rendered, but it's a functionality that we're calling so that we can capture events. Cool. So run build is fine. So yeah, okay, good. Like okay, mm, okay, deployment check. Visit the page, verify that the analytics is rendered optionally. Next step, let me know if you want any additional speed insights. Similarly, okay, no need. Custom event tracker also no need, provided with no privacy toggle, do not track, not needed at the moment. So this is something that you might want to add for your users if they prefer for you not to track their interaction with your application. But again, you're not obliged to do that. Lazy load analytics only in production. Right, if this project a small tracker is desired. Sure. Add 4. The rest don't really need, to be honest. Yeah, so it here added basically that this needs to be in production only. So it will not run when we try to, when we run dev, this will simply not be enabled, which is a good thing to have because we really don't need it to be tracking things while we're testing it. So it's actually quite good that it recommended that. Cool. So we're gonna do git add everything, git commit message is adding Vercel analytics. Done. So when we do git push origin main mm, push yeah, okay. So when we do git push origin main, let's go back to the browser, go back in here. So when we refresh this page, we will have the new build. And we see that we have a build failure, but it's too soon for a build failure, to be honest. Did it fail? Like for real? Okay. GitHub account was found matching the no GitHub account. Okay, how's that a thing? Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that was already the case. Okay. This is unfortunately a bit of a common problem, but that's fine. Let me fix that very quickly. Okay, so the problem that we have here is that okay, it says that the account is not matching. So basically, it's saying that okay, whatever account I'm using to currently push the code is seemingly not the same account that is an authorized account for like Vercel. So I will need to add an email address if I'm using a different one, just to make sure that the account verification works on Vercel to be able to build my application. So let me fix that very quickly. Okay, so Okay. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so I defined the email address specifically for the current repository, which now seems to work. Okay, we don't have to watch it here, so we can click on this one. It will show us that currently the deployment is happening. We can open this in a new tab. We can watch the build basically. So it will tell us what's happening. You can see here the build process is currently on the way. So deploying, so build logs, deployment output. And once it's done, everything will become green like it is now. It will also load a preview of our application so that you can see this loads the actual like browser window and gets a screenshot of your application. And the build is complete. It took almost a minute, which is still great. And now if we go to our analytics, this should be enabled on our app. And maybe we can put it to the test. So I can go and visit my application. So if I go to deployments and actually not just overview, and then I can just visit the app and go to my analytics, and I should be able to see something. Okay, might take a bit of time. Okay, so we have one view, right? So it's just me. And if anyone else, and you can also see where that user has been. Let me actually log in so that we can, because the user still exists, right? So our user that I created for testing is still existent. And I should be able to use them to log in. So let me just do that very quickly. Just 1 second. Um, Okay, so no, that's fine. Okay, and we're back. So we're in. I see there is some misalignment here, but yeah, the rendering might have changed a bit. Not sure. Okay. Anyway, so I logged in with the user that already exists, right? So we just basically get everything that we already had while we're working locally, because again, all of this information is coming from the database. I can create a new post after deployment, and this is like an actual web address, so this is no longer like on our own computer. We have a new post. Even if we go to our table editor and we go to posts, which I think we already were, not anymore. Okay. So yeah, new post after deployment is in our database. So our application is live. So we can see now that we have one visitor, 3-page view. So if we refresh, actually we don't need to refresh it. We can see that the user went to the main page, the user went to the login page, and the user also visited the dashboard. And anything that the user does will update our metrics. I can also go to the other user profile, right? So this navigation is now not great because here I don't have a button to go back to like my profile. So there is like still a lot of user interface refinement to be done. Again, this I think would have been much better if we would have done the planning with a better LLM. But yeah, we live and we learn, right? Okay, it's funny now. Yeah, okay, so it needed a bit of time. So it showed all of the users here very briefly, and then it loaded the logic to make sure that the current user isn't here. But okay, so if we go back to analytics, it has updated. So we have now 6-page views for the single user, where also this user has visited the Humble Dev 2 page. And one of these should say 2, at least the dashboard, but okay, it is what it is. So yeah, these are the analytics added, and this is all again like built-in functionality. So all we needed to do is add an analytics package into our build, as well as just add the component into our layout file, and that's it. From this point on, you'll be able to see the visitors that are coming to your page, where they're from, so from which country are they navigating to you, what browser do they use, I mean, all of this is just being captured by default. So currently, like the location of the user that's there, what device they're using, so this is desktop or mobile device, as well as what kind of computer it is, and all of this information is being passed to them through the browser. So the browser knows all of this about you, and is just sending it for analytic data. Cool. Yeah, so with that, a very basic app is hosted. Now, I do want to cover a topic that is, I mean, very relevant at the moment. I'm a bit kind of divided on how to tackle this because, again, like we said that we're going to build this application on Vercel from the beginning of the project, because I myself have deployed a number of projects on Vercel, and I find that it is a great developer and user experience in general. And again, if you're just hosting a relatively simple project with very little or even to like medium level interaction or like visitors to your page, it is more than sufficient to just use the free tier. And even if your application at some point gets some traction and you have some actual users, you could like start paying for it, and I think it's still worth it. However, in very, very recent times, the um, CEO of Vercel has posted some very controversial posts on X, where he met with a certain individual, and he is praising, that person's kind of vision and wanting peace and whatnot. While that's absolutely not what they stand for. While the company itself is not related to that illegal state. The guy himself is also not really related to them, but this is something that we kind of need to keep note of, because if in the future there would be better collaboration. So none of the data centers of Vercel are like located in occupied territory. There is no history of like the company itself being involved with any kind of like specific government. So should we steer clear from using the platform altogether? It's kind of up to you. We're not paying them anything at the moment, so if you're just going to be using the free tier, and at the end of the day, um, yeah, we're not like how do you call it? I don't know. It's your choice, right? However, if you want to host your application on a different platform, there are options. And one of these is a platform like Replit. So you can do the same. So you can create an account, connect to GitHub, just like I did with Vercel, and then tell it, okay, this is the repository, run my application. And Replit also supports, all of the major frameworks that you could be using. So even if you are using something else, then Next.js, you could host that as well. And they also have a free tier that you could use. You also have to kind of look at what do you get with your free tier. You can host up to 10 applications. You also have limits depending on like runtime, because every time that your server needs to do something, so there's actual functionality that requires processing. They give you 1,200 minutes of runtime during a month period. You get some storage by default to host your applications. There is quite a lot of limitation here because, again, I mean, it's free, so you can't expect the world to be given to you. You get 10 gigabytes of data transfer and whatnot. So this is an alternative. Another alternative, but it's going to be more complex, is Cloudflare. Cloudflare is more geared to enterprise use or like professional use. So setting this up as a like solo developer or just as like a hobbyist is going to be a bit more of a complex experience. So if you're going to go the Cloudflare route, I would advise you to look up a guide on how to deploy applications here, because they also have different modes of doing that. So you can host pages, which is very similar to like web hosting of like just a plain website. But if you have any functionality that requires a call to be made, something to be processed after a user input something, all of this still requires server runtime. So there is a server that needs to take action, and here you would need something other than just Cloudflare pages, where you also have to work with the workers and agents and whatnot. But again, it's an option. There is also a free tier. Cloudflare in general is quite a great platform in general. However, again, it's a bit more complex because it is built for a different kind of audience, if I may put it like that. So there are also other alternatives. You're free to scour the web and find whatever you think suitable. You could always go the VPS route. So if you are building an application that you want to host yourself, so you don't want to use any like web platform to host it, you can go to, I mean, any place where you can get a VPS. So one that is seemingly quite efficient, price effective, I mean, is Hetzner, if I'm writing this correctly. Yeah. So you can come in here and you can basically, necessary, you can get a VPS. So if we're going to okay, not fully dedicated, but a VPS, so you can have yeah. Intel. Yeah. So you can get a VPS for relatively cheap, depending on the area where you'll be. So they have hosting in Germany, Finland, and you can choose the tier of device that you want. You can choose the architecture that you want to use. So just a plain like Intel computer, but this will get you basically a server that is not configured. So you rent it. Again, you're paying like a monthly charge depending on the use that you're expecting. If you're building a relatively simple app, you can just get by with the cheapest hosting option. And then after that, you can upgrade if you don't find the performance is sufficient. Um, you can add storage and whatnot to your environment. So, but this you have to configure yourself. And if you're going this route, then it would be very, very good to look into a guide specifically for the hosting provider that you're going to be choosing. Also, do look at the reputation of the different hosting providers. So Hetzner is seemingly has great user experience. I've not used it myself. I've used a couple of other ones, but in recent times I haven't had the need to deploy VPS, so I cannot say that I have experienced this myself. But I've done a bit of research, and it seems very reputable. They have good support. The performance is good, and I mean, I would have no issues in giving this a try myself. And to make things very easy or very Vercel-like in terms of deployment, it would be very beneficial for you to also use something like Coolify to deploy your application. So Coolify is a is like a hosting platform, right? I don't know how to explain this properly. Let me think of an analogy. So if you just get a VPS, right? All you're getting is just a computer with Linux on it or Windows. But if you take Windows, you will have to pay for the Windows licensing. So I definitely don't prefer that. And Windows is generally absolutely not great to run a server for your application at all. So you will be using Linux. And if you're going to be using Linux, by default, you're most probably going to be running Ubuntu. You can run something else, but again, if you're not like a Linux user, you should not really be choosing anything else. So Ubuntu is a distribution of Linux. It is very popular. It is very widely used. It is very standardized. So it's kind of the obvious choice for like a default server deployment. But again, it's just like a computer. So you're getting basically something that is similar to Windows. So you just get a desktop that you're using, and it's just like an operating system, just like Windows or Mac or something like that. It's of course Linux, so it functions differently. But again, you're just getting a server with an operating system on it. In order for you to be able to deploy your web application in a similar way that we've just done with Vercel or with like Replit or Cloudflare, you can use Coolify. So you can basically deploy Coolify on your server, and Coolify provides you a web interface. Actually, do they have pictures that shows it? Docs, hopefully. Get started. Maybe here. Coolify. I might do a dedicated video on this one. So cloud. I'm just looking if I can show you. Yeah, okay. Look up a video for Coolify. It's quite great. It has also a relatively good user and like developer experience. There is also a deployment for Coolify on Hetzner. which they also recommend. But also you could use Coolify or like any other provider. And they also say like think of Coolify as your personal alternative to cloud platforms like Vercel, Railway, Heroku. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention all of these as well. There is a lot. So you can use Railway as well, which is also a similar platform. You can use Heroku. Also, all of these offer free tiers. So yeah, Railway, ship great products and whatnot. It's similar, but again different. So all of these platforms have their own philosophy on how to deploy web apps and how they should function and whatnot. The catch is that, again, if you're going to deploy an application that's going to be relatively light on users, then sure, like you can um, deploy it on here. Not all of these platforms offer a perpetual free tier, though. So some of these platforms will give you free tier for a period of time, but after that, they do expect you to start paying whether you're using a lot or not, right? So it's like here, Railway is like, okay, you can start for free, right? Start with 30-day free trial with $5 in credit, okay? Then you still have to pay $1 per month. Again, like this is not really much at all. But at the same time, it's not free. And the resources that you get to your disposal are also very limited because they would rather for you to like start paying at least $5 a month for like a hobby account, which might be worth it, right? So if you're running a project that makes you some money or you don't mind paying a bit to host your application professionally, then you can do that. You will have decent limits to work with, and you don't have to worry about like your like free user cap. But again, it's your decision. Heroku, a similar story. Also automated deployments and all these kind of things. Supports a whole bunch of libraries, not everything, but yeah, a good selection. Didn't we go to the pricing? Yes. Yeah, I personally don't like to use Heroku a lot, to be honest. I've used it before. I don't find it gives a great user experience, but again, it's my opinion. So yeah, you have a bunch of options. You can also look for other ones, but if you want to host something yourself, Coolify is really something that I would recommend. So having said all of that, yeah, so so this is the local deployment. We don't really need that anymore. So from this point on, everything is set up. I can continue to build my application. Yes, I can continue to build my app. What am I sharing at the moment? Desktop, yeah, okay. So I can continue to build my app. And I can just, whenever I'm ready, I can push a new build. The build will automatically get deployed, and my application will be up to date. What I do want to touch upon, and we'll do this in the next session, is how to build a new feature on a different branch. Because if you're going to be continuously like updating your application, you don't want to just add a feature, push it on your main branch, and then discover that you've broken something, right? Especially if other users are dependent are using your application and might run into this problem. Where it becomes very important to consider this code frozen. This is also what is called a code freeze in software development terms. That means that this code, so currently now that I've deployed this application and users can go to my application's website and actually sign up and use it, I shouldn't change this unless I'm like fixing something trivial. So there's like a typo somewhere, or I want to change like a color of like a font or something that doesn't change functionality, right? And if I want to add a feature, I need to create a new branch, okay, which will be just a copy of my main branch, but in a different branch. And then I can play around with that as much as I want. I can create new user stories. I can have the developer implement these. I can test them. I can even push these, but they will be deployed in development, even on the cloud, so that users can't access these. So a user can't go to my development branch and like start using it, because only an authenticated cloud admin, so on Vercel, by the person who is hosting the account, I'm the admin. So if I try to go to the link of my like branch, not the main one, but the one that I'm using for building, it won't allow me to enter unless I'm signed in. And then I can do all of the validation. I can host it. I can try it online and like work with the app, find things that are broken and fix them or change behavior. And then when I'm done, when I'm like, okay, this new feature that I've added or a bunch of features that I've added are now functional. I don't need to change anything anymore. I can just, yeah, it's called merging. So I will merge the new branch that has all of the new stuff with my main branch. So I will be combining them together, which sometimes could introduce conflicts with different files and changes that might be overlapping. But we'll cover these when we get to that point. But at some point, my main will be a combination of the old main and the branch, the new branch that I created with a bunch of new functionality. And this will then be pushed as the main branch. So we'll be combining them into one. We're going to be pushing a new main that now has all of the features together. And this is how we basically update our application over time. We can have multiple branches, so we can have 2, 3, 10 different branches that are there at the moment. We can be developing a feature inside each and every one of them. At some point, if we like don't like a feature at all that we have thought would be cool, we added it and we didn't really like it, we can just get rid of the branch and like never add it to our application. Okay. So this is where we will continue next week. I hope that you have found this episode helpful, that you're successful in getting your application up and running, hosted, deployed, and functional. Right? If you want recommendations for getting a domain registered, I would advise to register your domains with Cloudflare. It's not a popular thing, so if you look online, you will see that go with GoDaddy, which I absolutely don't recommend. But you have Namecheap, you have a bunch of other ones that are purely domain registrars. But I would advise to buy your domains on Cloudflare, because Cloudflare provides you with a lot of domain security by default for free without upselling you for all of the additional features, which I think is great. And that's the reason for me why I would register any new domain that I want on Cloudflare. I used Google Domain for a short period of time, but then they discontinued Google Domain, and Google is very famous for introducing a new service and then discontinuing that shortly after. So yeah, but when they came up with like domain buying, to be honest, I never thought that they would discontinue that, just because it seems so logical for Google to also do domain registration. But I was wrong. Anyway, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. Um, Add a comment. Let me know on Slack how you're going, how your build is going, and if you succeeded in actually getting your build up running. And we'll continue next week with more deployment, more feature adding, branches, as well as merging your branch into main at some point, and how to get everything up running. Let me know if you want to see adding a domain in action. And other than that, we'll catch up with you next week. Thank you very much again for watching and for joining. Take care, have a good day, and see you next time. Bye bye.